So the end result in this video is going to be an interface where you can click on buttons and then swap out the 3D models. So this has turned out to be quite a long video because we're going to look at the entire toolchain. So we're going to start with a reference image that you want to augment. We're going to upload that to the target manager on the Wikitude website, and that'll download a tracking file which we've used before, but this time we're creating our own one. On the other side we have 3D models we're going to create in Blender. We're going to use the 3D encoder that you install on your own computer to convert that to WT3 files, which we can then combine together and create our augmented reality. And you're going to be able to press buttons and swap them out, which is the different thing we're going to look at this time. So where we're going to get a reference image, there's this website called Pixabay. It's a very good source because all of the images are under Creative Commons 0, which means they're completely free to use, royalty free, for anything you like. Any other image you get, there's probably going to be attribution and things like that connected to it. In this case, we're just going to search for a random medical machine. Here we've got an imaging scanner. We're just going to download that and use that as our reference image. So to create the tracking file, come to Wikitude site, go to the target manager. Okay, you get this help file to begin with. Some help information. Let's add a project. Let's give it a random name, or not so random. AR arm. There you can see a count of how many targets you've got left to generate. Let's add a target. We'll just drag the image that we've downloaded from Pixabay into this box here. Okay, drop that there. There you can see the image, and we'll just upload it. And there you can see it. So it's got 1 star at the moment, which I think means it's quite a poor reference image, but it'll do in this case. We click on that button to download the WTC file. We click on generate, and it will send us an email once it's finished. And that's it, that's our tracking file. So I'm going to quickly show you some things in Blender. So when we start a new file, we've got all this stuff. We press the A key, it will select everything, and the delete key, and then we can delete. Okay. So Blender isn't the 3D modeling package I'm most familiar with, but what we're doing is fairly basic. We're essentially creating a set of tubes. Okay, it's best if you've got a middle mouse button so you can move around there. What I was just showing is you can use the number pad as well. So we're going to add a plane. If we press the S key, we can scale. If we press the X key, that restricts it to the X axis. Again, we can press S to scale, press the Y key to restrict it to the Y axis, and create this flat plane. We're going to use this to add a reference image. So if we press tab, we move into edit mode. Say tab again, we're into object mode. You can also do it by clicking down here, selecting it from the menu. And we go up to the shading UVs and to unwrap, and then just the normal unwrap. Okay, nothing looks like it's happened. What we need to do is expand this bottom window and change the view to the UV image editor. Okay, and then we can see the unwrapped image. Okay, let's just go and find a file that we're going to use as the reference. So essentially this first plane that we're creating is going to give us a reference image that we can trace and shape our model around. Eventually we'll delete it, but it's just there to help us to begin with. Okay, so there's the image. It's a picture of my arm which I badly traced around in Photoshop. Okay, so we need to switch to text view in order to see it. So we saw that there. So now we can manipulate the location of the vertices in this bottom window and choose what's shown on that actual plane. So you can use A to deselect everything, then B to draw a box around what you want to select, G to grab, and again if we want to restrict just the Y axis for up and down we can press Y, You've pressed R to rotate. It's all shortcuts in Blender, really. You can probably find all of those controls in the menus and things like that somewhere, but it's just a lot faster to learn some of those shortcut keys. B for box, drag around, G for grab, say Y for the Y-axis to restrict it, drag it up. A to deselect, B for box, G for grab, drag them down. There we are. Alright. So actually when I look at this, I'm not getting the result that I want in the top window. So R to rotate around. Let's flip it over that way. What I'm actually going to use now is S to scale, and there's a trick where if you scale down to 0 and then into the negative, it flips over, and that's what we want. Alright, and that's what I'm looking for. And then we can come back up into the top. Let's move that one down. Press the tab key back into object mode. Because when we're in object mode, we can create new objects that are independent of that one. So we're going to add a circle. See, it's been added into the middle there. If you press F6 immediately after creating something, you get some fine adjustments. So 32 pixels is too, or vertices is too many. So just drop that down to 11. You can see it's become less refined. So in AR, because it's running on a tablet device in real time, you don't want it as high resolution as you might be if you were rendering it. Okay. So I've switched to ortho view there. That's with the number 5 key. If you see me switching between them, I think ortho is easier when you're positioning things. Okay, so R to rotate, spin that circle around. You can hold the control key to snap to discrete angles, so you can get a nice 90 degree, and just drag it down by moving the arrows. Okay, so you can click on the arrows with the left mouse button and drag it around just in one axis, same as pressing G and restricting to an axis with X or Y. Alright, so now we've gone into edit mode. If we press the E key for extrude and then X, we can sort of shift it out to create segments along our tube. So I'm going to create an arm here. I'll also show you 3D models that were created for muscles and for bones, all exactly the same process, just shaped tubes with textures applied to them. So we're doing this over and over. E for extrude, X to restrict it to the X axis, and just dragging along. So for this next part, make sure you untick this button which limits selection just to the bits you can see, because you want to select the ones in the background as well. So A to select everything, scale Y, we'll just shrink it down a bit so we can see the background image. A to deselect, B for the box again, G to grab, Y-axis, S to scale, Y-axis. And we're going to do that over and over across the entire arm. B for box, G for grab, Y-axis, S for scale on the Y-axis, A to deselect, B for box, G for grab, S for scale, and again both of those on the Y-axis. A to deselect, B for box, over and over. You get the idea. It's repetition across the whole thing. I was going to speed this up at double time, but it only takes 3 minutes off the overall length of the video, so I didn't bother in the end. But you can see it's not a great deal of effort really to get the general shape of the object you're tracing. Okay, so nearly there. I think actually I don't need the last row of vertices column. So, delete. There we have it. Look, we can spin it around. Let's just select everything, scale it in Z just to make it a bit thinner. And that's it, okay? So now we need to apply the texture. Track the right one. So just to begin with, we're just going to use exactly the same image. So we're going to unwrap, and this time we're going to go for project from view. That's probably the easier one. Again, come down to this bottom window. We're just going to be grabbing, rotating, scaling, just to get it in exactly the position we want. Alpha rotate, spin it around. Remember the scale trick to flip it over. Grab to move it. Scale it down. We're about there. Okay, doesn't look too bad. Come back to the 3D model. Tab to go into object mode. Delete that reference. There we go. Sort of looks a bit like an arm. Good enough for this example anyway. Okay, so now we're going to export it to FBX. That's the file format that the Wikitude one needs. You can choose binary or ASCII. If you choose binary, you can't re-import it into Blender, but you can open it in a text editor and look and identify if your textures are in the wrong place and things like that. So give it a name, export it. So now we need the 3D encoder. So we can go back to the website, find the link for the 3D encoder. This page just gives you descriptions. There's some guides at the bottom. But if you actually want it, you have to go to the download section. On the Tools tab, you can see Mac OS and Windows are your two options. So this is it. Once you've downloaded it, the Wikitude 3D encoder, we open our FBX file. There it is. Is it opening? And we've got some errors, okay, to do with a non-power of 2 texture. Right. So standard in 3D modeling is to have textures where their dimensions are a power of 2. Right, but it's coming okay, and it'll normally work all right even without that. But let's have a look at what that power of 2 means. So this is the basic, very poor texture that we used. If we go and look at the image size, switch it to pixels, we see it's huge. It's really a bad example. This is a better example. So first of all, I've extended the edge a bit so it didn't have to be too accurate when I'm aligning it. And blended that in. And if we look at the image size, we see those are to a power of 2. 256, 512, 128, 64. Alright, those are all powers of 2. And that's a better image to use as a texture. This is us exporting it to the WT3 file. And let's save it. And that's a file that you can load in Wikitude. Right, we can open it again just to check that everything's okay. Seems fine. Textures on and everything. We'll go with that. So this is showing you what the structure will look like on the web server. There's the tracker file that we got in the email. And those are the WT3 files, which are the exported 3D models. Okay, so we've got skin, muscles, bones, and we're going to switch between them. These are just some images for the buttons that are going to appear on the page to press on them, and there's the HTML file that pulls it all together. And That's what we're going to spend some time looking through. Most of this has been covered in previous videos. We start with the scripts to load in the architect.js library. There's our CSS and some structure just for the buttons. There's the image. We don't actually need that yet. I'll come on to that later. We use the styling to show which button's been pressed. So just divs with images. There's the tracker file, so that's the one where we uploaded the image, got sent the email, downloaded the file. So this is the first time we've created our own. These are 3D models we load in one at a time. I was quite fortunate, I think, that I could just scale them at one. If your model comes in and it's massive, you need to reduce that scale. If it comes in it's too small, you can increase it however you need it to be. In my case, one was fine for all of them. Right? And it can help if you build it all together in one Blender file so that it's all the same scale, and just save them out and export them individually. So this is the trackable 2D object which combines them together. So our tracker and one of the models, right? So we're just going to start by loading the skin 3D model. That's like the arm that I just showed you being made. Down at the bottom here we've got some standard JavaScript to trigger functions when someone presses or clicks on the divs. Right, so there's the function name that it's going to call when somebody clicks that div. Choose skin. You can see it highlighted above. And this is the bit that's new. This is the bit that lets you swap between models. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the cam drawable. Okay, so there's the page object. There's the drawables within it, and that's the skin model that we're loading to begin with. So in our function, we're going to go to page, drawables, and remove the cam drawable that's at 0. Alright, so this 0 doesn't mean nothing. It means the first 3D model in an array. So we remove it, and then we're going to add a cam drawable. And the one that we add depends on what function was called. So this is that simple one in action. There's our reference image. We can see skin comes up to begin with. Press on muscle, switches to muscle. We press the bones, switches to bones. Simple as that. Alright? But it's switching between those models. Right, so let's do something a little bit more responsive and user friendly. We've loaded in jQuery just to make adding and removing classes easier. We've got a selected class defined which just adds a border around, and we'll start by saying the skin class is selected. So it's a button and it's selected. You can have multiple classes in there. Okay, so we come down to the function. This is where we're going to turn that selection on and off. And we're using jQuery just because it's much easier to do that. So anything that has a button class will remove the class of selected. Alright, so we don't care which button currently has the selected class applied to it. Anytime any div is pressed, we'll just remove selected from all of them. So after this runs, nothing will be selected. And then we'll choose the specific one with the ID of skin, and we're going to add the class to that. So it's very similar to the 2 lines of code above. We're just removing whatever's there to begin with, and then specifically choosing which one we want to add, either to add the 3D model above or add the selected class to, in this case. And that code is going to be the same in each function, with the exception of the thing that's going to have the selected class applied. Alright, if we go up, these are the IDs we're looking for. Skin, actually they're plural, muscles and bones, so we just add the S's on so the names are the same. Okay, so that was just the interface to track which divs were pressed. Now we're going to look at how we can keep track of which models are displayed, so we can be a bit more fine-grained. Right? So instead of removing all of them, we can choose which ones we want to remove. So we're going to have some variables which just tell us which models are visible. So it's like a flag for each one, whether we can see the skin, see the muscles, see the bones. And because when the app first loads, we're going to have the skin visible, that one's set to true, the others are false. Okay, so we come down to our function. It's these two lines that we're going to replace with something a bit more intelligent. Right. So in each case we're going to check the flag, see if it's in the state we want it to be in, and if it isn't, we're going to change something. Right. So if we've clicked on the div to show the skin and we can't see the skin, then we need to add it. Right, simple enough. And then update the flag so we know whether we can see the skin or not. Then pretty much the same thing for the other two models. Whereas in this case, if we can see the muscles, we want to remove that one. So this line of code, but instead of passing in the number of the array item that we want to remove, we can actually give it the name of the 3D model. Right? So this one, we called it muscles. If we pass that name in, it will remove it. Okay? And again, update that flag. Okay, and for this case, bones is pretty much the same as muscles. If we can see it, we don't want to see it. Because it's hidden inside the skin, it's just extra rendering that we don't need. Right, here's the bones. Update the flag. Okay, so now we can remove this. And again, we need pretty much the same code in the other functions, right? There's probably more efficient ways of doing this, but this is the clearest to see, right? So now we've chosen the muscle, we've clicked on the muscle button. So if we could see the skin, we want to remove it. All right, remember to update that flag so we can keep track. All right, so now if we can't see the muscles, we do want to see that one. So far this has seemed very similar to what we were doing before. We're just turning them on and off one at a time. But now let's say we want to see the bones and the muscles. So when we choose muscles, we want to see the muscles, but we want to see the bones underneath as well. So we want to choose the two models, right? Very similar again. Check the flag. If we can't see it, add it. Update the flag. Right? So you can see we've got more control. We can adjust and show what we want to see and what we don't. In this case, now if we say choose bones, that's the only thing we want to see. So if the flags for the others are true, we'll hide them. Okay, and that's that. So let's see that one in action. So see the skin. If we press muscles, all right, we can see the muscles. Just look top left, you can see the bones underneath as well. Bones, muscles disappear. Muscles, they come back. All right, skin, both are hidden underneath. We'll assume. We'll pretend everything's working fine. And that's it.